Good afternoon. Hi, Dr. Brost. Hi, Chris. Hi, Kim. How are you on this Friday?
Good.
Doing well, thank you.
Doing well. Good afternoon. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, good afternoon. It's nice to see you all today. So we will just jump in, and Kim, would you like to make some introductions to our lovely guests today?
I would indeed. Did you have some slides you wanted to show as well, or should I begin with intros, Stephanie?
Let's start with intros. It's still thinking.
Wonderful. Welcome to Planet-Based Healing this Friday, 29th May, in the beautiful year of COVID 2020. As we all refine and define living our best lives and being good stewards of this planet, and hopefully making conscious changes to move forward and stay well, wellness for all. And a big part of wellness for many of us, we've seen an incredible boost in CBD and essential marijuana, medical marijuana, cannabis sales. A big part of the science and qualification and quantification of plant-based healing through cannabis comes down to the very important aspect of third-party independent lab testing and the science behind the brands, the products, the production that you're purchasing. Very delighted to introduce from my neighbors and friends here in Montana, from Stillwater Labs, Dr. Ron Brost is in the white shirt, the gentleman in present here. He's PhD in chemistry, Bachelor of Engineering, Chemical Engineering. He's an accomplished and analytical research scientist, PhD with ground-up involvement as the founder and owner of Stillwater Labs. Ron was involved in planning, funding, building, and implementing Montana's first ISO IEC 17025-2017 accredited state licensed medical cannabis testing lab. As of 2019, Stillwater Labs of Montana expanded to hemp, water, and essential oil testing. This wonderful doctor and leader of Stillwater Labs, Dr. Ron Brost, is accompanied by his lovely wife, Chris Brost, sitting to his side. She is the operations director of Stillwater's Labs. She's also an attorney in corporate law and also has her master's in tax law. She also has a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture. And together, this is a very dynamic couple, some of my dearest friends in the science community. And I'm really honored that you joined us today to give us the download or the upload into the importance of third-party lab testing hemp-derived products.
Well, thank you for inviting us. We appreciate the opportunity to disclose what we have to disclose, and we look forward to the next hour.
Thank you. So glad you're here with us. So with that, Stephanie, did you want to show your slides, or should we go on to our YouTube and overview? And if I may interject here, this is unabashedly a promotion, or not meant to be a promotion, but you will see the name Stillwater Labs come up as we've had the pleasure of working on some education video materials, which we'll be sharing with you, which are part of Stillwater Labs' YouTube channel, part of their website. The education, the foundation, the science in this information provided from Stillwater Labs, I'm very, very glad to promote and put forward their work and what they're doing for the state of Montana and the hemp industry overall.
Yes, we'll go to the video.
Stillwater Labs provides product analysis to growers, manufacturers, retailers, and consumers worldwide. Our state-licensed analytical lab is internationally accredited by ISO. Independent lab testing ensures product quality and safety. We are committed to providing the community with accurate and top-end analytical services.
Do you all want to just press mute, and I'm going to play that again because there's some repeat on the video.
Yes, I've turned microphone off in the top toolbar.
Do you see it? Okay.
Stillwater Labs provides product analysis for growers, manufacturers, retailers, and consumers worldwide. Our state-licensed analytical lab is internationally accredited by ISO. Independent lab testing ensures product quality and safety. We are committed to providing the community with accurate and top-end analytical services at a fair and sustainable cost. Hemp is becoming an industrial, ecological, environmental, and economic force. Montana is leading the way in America's hemp industry, with over 28% of the U.S. total acreage in cultivation. Stillwater Labs is located in the midst of the emerging hemp industry. Hemp is a common source of cannabidiol, or CBD, which is only one of over 150 phytocannabinoids produced by Cannabis sativa L. Our services focus on testing terpene and cannabinoid profiles for product performance. Hemp is also subject to contamination for several reasons. For example, hemp is an effective bioaccumulator, withdrawing impurities from contaminated earth and soil. Plants are subject to pesticide exposure during growth, microbe and mold exposure during storage and handling, and solvent exposure during processing. Due to these facts, hemp products should not be used without being lab tested. Independent lab testing gives consumers confidence when purchasing healthy, safe, and sustainable hemp-based products. Request a third-party independent lab report, also referred to as a COA, Certificate of Analysis. This will be explained further in our How to Read a Lab Report video. Product testing is recommended for the many uses of hemp, from therapeutic to industrial applications, and testing may eventually be mandated. Consumers need to ask for independent lab tests verified by a certificate of analysis and ideally available for the entire chain of custody of products.
All right. Very interesting. You just want to turn your microphones back on. Great.
Okay.
Ron and Chris, I think besides the good content of that video, an overview of what happens briefly in the lab testing process, what rings true is the importance of mandated lab testing. We're not there yet. Clearly, there's still differing or lack of clarity between different governing bodies as it relates to hemp through the FDA, DEA, and agricultural bodies of our country here in the United States. But we, with you all on the side of science, would you vote for the mandatory or standardization of testing for hemp products in all categories? Do you think that's important for consumer protection?
Oh, absolutely. And accepted standard is really a cornerstone of national commerce and maybe international commerce. So understanding that when you buy a product from whether it's from Kentucky or Montana or Colorado, that it does have a consistent quality. The purity is there. The compounds are there. The contamination isn't there, so that you can with confidence use that in either making another product or using that directly.
So in addition, or in conjunction with that, the testing that we recommend at Stillwater Labs is, the testing that we recommend at Stillwater Labs for hemp is based upon the medical marijuana standards that have been set by the states. Obviously, there's no federal mandate at the moment for that, but we do base our testing upon the standards that have been set for medical marijuana. That being said, each state has a different standard, and deciding, which pesticides are important in the hemp industry as opposed to any other industry, it's going to take some time. And as much as we'd love to see mandatory testing for consumer safety, there is going to be a lot of, it's going to take a while to get it all sorted out between what standards to adhere to.
A case in point being the pesticides from one state to the next, California, Oregon, Washington State, Colorado, Nevada, and Montana all have slightly different what are called panels, groups of pesticides that we test for. And not only that, but the limits are also somewhat different depending on the status within the state. So sorting through that will take some time. On the other hand, there are groups of tests that we can apply. There are groups of standards that we can apply using the same equipment, using basically the same process. And depending on what the intention is, what your target customer is, we can call those up and determine whether your product is suitable for that particular person, application, state.
I understand. So it sounds like standardization in progress.
Yeah, hopefully, we hope.
Yeah.
And of course, there's also the rest of the hemp plant will be focused for this seminar on the CBD and other cannabinoids. But if you're looking at the whole hemp industry, you have fiber, and they have certain properties that you want to test for. If you're using it for cloth, yes, we'll have one set. If you're using building materials, you have another. So all these, we have different sets of standards, different tests, and maybe different laboratories.
Got it. So keeping in mind the four main categories of hemp and the byproducts of hemp: food, fiber, medicine, and I just lost it. Food, wait, food and medicine, like in the bud, fiber and fuel in the stalk, in the stem and the fibrous part of the plant. The taller, the more fiber. And then the roots as well. A lot of that used in healing as well. Those categories of hemp, we would love to take a deeper dive into what you have presented to us in the PowerPoint, which we really appreciate, to help us take a look at the importance of hemp in all the byproducts and all the final categories of hemp, CBD and beyond.
Okay, sure. Well, let's step into the presentation, and I'll screen share here. So, there we go.
Food, fiber, medicine, fuel. In a nutshell, food, fiber, medicine, fuel. That's where we are.
It's an amazingly versatile plant, and I think we're coming to recognize that more and more every day. So
Yes.
again, thanks everybody for inviting us to this webinar, and thanks for attending. We, as the Stillwater Lab, we've been as a entity since 2017. We've actually, we're the first lab in Montana licensed under the Montana Medical Marijuana Act. It was put in 2017. We are privately held. We have 16 full-time employees, and we service over 200 clients in Montana. We're spread over 120,000 square miles. We service that with our own vehicles, our company vehicles. We put on about 300,000 miles a year collecting samples under the medical marijuana program.
Right.
But we've also been getting increasing business under the, or doing increasing analysis under the Farm Bill Hemp Act, so nationally since actually 2017. So we've, between the medical marijuana and the hemp, we've learned a lot. It's this is an industry that really, previous to the last 2 years, really hasn't had a lot of standard set. We're still forming those. Of course, the movement of cannabis products across borders has still been contentious. But despite that, we're all making progress. The labs do work together. The industry, of course, is making great strides in establishing the benefits of this really wonderful material, and at the same time understanding what is required for safe application.
Very good.
Another important part of laboratories are the accreditation. You need to have credibility in your analysis. You need to have confidence in what is being reported. And there's a standard called 17025-2017. And this is an international standard that's applied to laboratories. It's a very thick book of requirements that laboratories need to comply with, all the way through from how do you set up your business organization to the statistics that you apply to your analysis. And labs that have completed this analysis and been audited, the audit itself is a week-long process generally. They receive accreditation through a number of bodies. We happen to use the A2LA out of Maryland, Also, coincident with that, we're certified through the Americans for Safe Access, the patient-focused certification, which is a hemp-specific program to certify that you are going to the extra mile to not only just operate as a functioning best practices laboratory, but also you have standards, you have measures in place to handle cannabis and cannabis products.
And if I may just briefly state, Americans for Safe Access is part of the certification, as you mentioned, that Stillwater Labs earned. AmericansForSafeAccess.org focuses on patient advocacy for medical cannabis, but they also have the lane of advocacy and education for hemp and CBD. Through Ron and Chris, I was led to Americans for Safe Access and have since read thoroughly and shared many of their reports and research on their website. On June 19th, on Planet-Based Healing, Americans for Safe Access will be on the show with one of their educators. So they're really a leading advocacy, lobbyist, education body. And again, as mentioned, as you can see on this slide that Ron and Chris have prepared, accredited the blue and white A2LA, that relates to consumer safety through Americans for Safe Access certification, which Stillwater Labs has earned.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of certification and a lot of accountability to what Stillwater Labs and science brings to consumer safety and hemp. So we're very grateful.
Yeah, it's a theme that will come up over the next hour. The traceability, the ability to say, yes, we know what's in this material. That's very, very important. And being able to track that all the way through, even through the national sources for our reference materials. It's all very important to understanding how reliable is that data. Laboratories, there's always experimental error in any experiment. However, you need to understand how it's being handled, and you want to know what it's based on. It's traceability, it's chain of custody, it's eventually where did this information come from, and there should be a good story behind that from every laboratory.
A good story and some good science behind it.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Okay, so our laboratory is located in, actually this is our analytical lab, but our laboratory is in the northwest corner of Montana, which seems like an out-of-the-way spot in the U.S., but actually we are almost the epicenter of the hemp growing world. Montana is relatively new to medical marijuana, but hemp has really exploded over the last couple of years here. To the point where we are the largest growing state, surpassing Colorado and Kentucky. Not that it's a competition, but we are a very strong agricultural state, and there's been a huge amount of acreage committed to growing here. And we're in the middle of that here. We run a lot of tests on for local farmers, looking for potency, looking for contamination, and assuring that the products coming out of Montana are the highest quality possible.
If I may ask, Dr. Brost,
yes.
From the video that we saw previously, we knew in 2019 that Montana held 28% of the hemp in the ground, referring to the video that we showed previously. Montana.
Right. It's a huge, right? It's a huge portion of the huge part of the industry originates here from Montana.
Well, it does, and it's interesting in both the lanes of cannabis and hemp. Take a big global company like Aurora Cannabis, who has now pivoted their business to be Aurora Hemp. In some ways, they've made that operational directional structure to change more into advocating, promoting business behind hemp. So that said, with Stillwater Labs and you all being at the helm of hemp, are you able to test hemp from other states and bring it into Montana for the testing required if there's a certificate that shows it's 0.3% THC or lower? Can you test hemp nationally and internationally at Stillwater Labs?
Yeah, it's kind of a catch-22 because as long as it complies with the 0.3%, which is dictated through the Farm Bill Act, as long as it's less than 0.3%, yes, you can transport it, you can send it across the border using post office, using courier services. However, the catch-22 comes in. How does a farmer in, say, Colorado know that the hemp is less than 0.3% before he sends it out for analysis?
Exactly.
So far, the post office has been very accommodating with that, understanding it, and on good faith, if it's sent, understanding that it is hemp, and there's a reasonable expectation that it is going to be less than 0.3%. They've been allowing us to transport.
You brought up a good point, Kim. There is actually a certificate that the farmers are required to get to be certified as Farm Bill hemp farmers. And given that certification, there's a presumption that it's the THC level is less than the 0.3%. Therefore, there's a presumption that it's legal across state boundaries. So we can test even if there's not a previous test saying it's less than 0.3. There's a certain amount of leeway, I think, at the moment, because with all the new states starting to grow hemp that never did before, when it was basically illegal, there's a to comply to sort of the to apply is to comply rule. If you've complied with all of the requirements leading up to your harvest, they're going to let you send it out to be tested to make sure without penalty.
Got it. So it's really crossing the T's, dotting the I's, and working within the regulations or standards as they're set from the ground up with hemp. That makes good sense. And for all of you that have your voter cards and are voting, please vote for hemp, vote for legalization. The more that we can qualify and support this growing industry, it's just makes all the difference for future opportunities with hemp for healing in every category. And it's going to take legalization, standardization to really have this be a phenomenal agricultural commodity and product in every category.
Right. And your question is actually a really good lead into our next slide.
Yeah. So cannabis as a marijuana and cannabis as a hemp are basically the same plant. Cannabis, sativa L, and it's basically a varietal difference between the two. Marijuana, the traditional marijuana used for inhaling or extraction and other consuming methods, is primarily bred for THC. Yes, there are strains now that are blends of THC and CBD, or there are even strains that are still fall into marijuana, but are really CBD, almost completely CBD strains. But hemp has been is really only or should only be primarily a CBD strain. There are mutations happening between strains as the plant develops, and it is possible to move from a primarily CBD strain to a THC strain, which is one of the reasons why we test these so frequently. So keeping the THC under 0.3 is a continual, it's a battle, but this is a definitely continual awareness of the crop. We don't want 10,000 acres that has half a percent THC. That would be a problem. So you need to recognize your feedstock, and even your cultivation methods do affect how the ratio between these two compounds.
We are finding an issue with some of well, not really an issue, but some of the hemp farmers here in Montana who have just started growing hemp. They've gotten seeds from the appropriate seed banks from Colorado or elsewhere where it's been legal or more legal. Let's put it that way. And seeds that are certified to be less than to grow plants that are less than 0.3% in Colorado. They're growing it here in Montana, and it's coming up as 0.5%. Just because of the difference in the growing conditions, the difference in the soil, the difference in the day length, et cetera, et cetera. Thank goodness the Montana State Department of Agriculture has recognized this and said, well, you've tried your best. We're not going to prosecute you for growing something under the Farm Bill that isn't 0.3, and maybe there's some way we can allow you to use that. But so there needs to be recognition that what might be a 0.3% cannabis hemp plant in Colorado is actually not going to be that somewhere else. So it's been there's a lot of growing pains going on with the since the passing of the Farm Bill, and people trying to get in compliance, trying to be in compliance, and having plants not cooperate with them, which unfortunately, like any living organism,
Right.
they don't always follow the rules.
Well,
You don't follow our rules anyway.
Right.
that's right. Mother Nature has a plan. We're part of it.
Right. Yeah, it's, so it is a fine line between marijuana and hemp, and whether you produce THC or CBD. That's part of the management, and of course that's part of the analysis that we.
I see. Hence science lab testing. We have to know.
Absolutely.
Right, and just to, as I'm sure everyone who's watching knows, the main difference is between the THC and the CBD. They're actually very similar compounds, but the THC is the psychotropic compound that gives people the so-called high off of marijuana. CBD does not produce a high. It's not psychotropic. It just appears to have medicinal qualities. And not to stray from the pro-hemp thing, because we are pro-hemp, it appears from some preliminary studies that plants that have amounts of both THC and CBD seem to be better medicine. But
Right.
the way the legal situation is for hemp and marijuana right now, we're focused on, or the country is focused on the CBD medicinal effects from hemp, and less so the THC effects.
And THC and CBD are only two of, I think we're 150 different cannabinoids and counting. There are many isomers and many compounds, cannabinoids, slightly different functional groups that have their own special properties, medicinal or even euphoric. EV, for example, has a 3-carbon chain rather than 5-carbon pendant chain on the compound. We have CBG, another very interesting compound medicinally. It's a precursor for both THC and CBD. We have CBC, which is a product, actually it's a decomposition product with THC, which also has properties. So it's a very rich family of compounds. Each of them seem to have special properties up to possibly anti-cancer properties. So it's very interesting from that aspect alone. But as Chris was saying, the focus has been THC versus CBD. The CBD itself, we're exploring, we're learning so much about that, and I think the next few years are going to really reveal what its potential is.
And again, we'll stick in the FDA warning: these none of these claims have been verified. Blah blah blah.
Right. But,
well, let's get to that. Yeah. Absolutely, because yes, we have confusion on a federal level. Doesn't help the cause.
Yeah, yeah. But with that, of course, there have been very well qualified medical studies that have established, at least for certain pathologies, the effectiveness of CBD, epilepsy, and it goes on from there.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So in addition to, we've been focused on the cannabinoids, but there's a whole other world here, and that's on terpenes. The terpenes, of course, are plant produced, and they're used for the protection, reproduction, plant communications, basically the language of the plants that we've adopted very nicely into our own existence. Aromatherapy and the application of essential oils are primarily actually dealing with terpenes. And like many other plants, cannabis and specifically hemp does have a group of predominant terpenes that are also contributing or could also contribute to the therapies. The different ratios, of course, chlorofylline, myrcene, humulene, linalool, lavender, limonene, the citrus scent, are all parts of the aroma spectrum that you see with cannabis plants. And this is also something to recognize. And as a laboratory, it's something that we also analyze for, so that our clients have a better, more complete understanding of what their product has, what it represents.
This is beautiful. So the lab report will give the terpene profile, which is the future, not unlike buying a beer or a wine. It has notes of this and flavors of that. That's coming through in hemp. The sommeliers of hemp and cannabis really rely on a terpene profile for the characteristics of that plant as well as its efficacy. Do terpenes affect the entourage effect, Ron? Do terpenes make a difference in our biological response, our endocannabinoid response to the product?
Right. And not to dwell on the marijuana side of it, but for example, pinene is well known to open the bronchial passages, and this just by inference would help the absorption of THC or CBD or whatever else was in the vapor. So with that very simple example, you can see how the terpenes are very synergistic with the cannabinoids. Plus, on themselves, I mean, just on their own basis, they have their own properties, and aromatherapy is I think a well documented and well utilized technique for healing, and
Beautiful.
And this works very well into that.
Just so you all know, stay tuned, keep watching this Space and Channel. We have Emma Chasen of Portland, Oregon. She is the terpene queen, and she's presenting PLANeT Healing next month, all about terpenes.
Wonderful.
So we'll be happy to expound on this. And terpenes show up in the lab test as well. Excited to see that.
Mm-hmm. Right, yeah. Applying the science, getting the concentration, understanding. And terpenes, by the way, also shift depending not only on the strain that you're growing, but also on the growing conditions. There's one example where if there's a sign of insect infestation or even minor aggression, the plant reacts to that by producing larger amounts of certain terpenes, such as ocimene. And we can detect that, we can report that back, and aside from the difference in the smell of the plant, you can also use that as an agricultural tool, as an agricultural compass to understand what's happening with your plants.
Brilliant.
Okay, so hemp products, many hemp products, of course.
The 4 categories that Kim mentioned.
Yeah, rope, textiles, clothing, shoes, food, paper, bioplastics, insulation, biofuel,
food.
Food. The list is phenomenally huge. And
Yes.
I'm trying to think of a plant that has an equivalent scope, and I'm coming up blank. So, but it's a wonderfully versatile plant. The seeds and flowers, of course, are used in health foods, organic body care, nutraceuticals, just with the oil. But the hemp flower is our primary focus as a laboratory, and for this particular webinar, the phytocannabinoids especially, notwithstanding the terpenes. So what happens normally? Yes, you can actually inhale a dried flower bud from hemp. It is done, but usually the materials, the phytocannabinoids, terpenes, and other compounds are extracted, and this can be extracted by through soak with hydrocarbons. That doesn't sound very good, but it's actually very, very effective. You can use supercritical carbon dioxide, emerging more or becoming more popular method.
Extraction processes you're speaking of?
You can use alcohols, although alcohols tend to bring out more compounds that you may want to leave behind. So there are many ways to extract your cannabinoids, phytocannabinoids, and terpenes, and other bioorganics that you're interested in.
And again, the importance of that lab test to make sure those solvents, those compounds used to extract those plant properties and healing are not in the final product. So that's the part of the lab test that shows the solvents are hopefully not present.
Right, exactly. So these extracts are used as they're infused into, well, they can go into edibles, they can go into tinctures, they can be used in many, many different ways. That, of course, that's a choice of the consumer and manufacturer.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant.
So, why test hemp? Actually, I'm going to turn this over to Chris here.
Okay. So the question is, why test hemp? More of the this slide is actually more about what we do test in hemp. The reason that we do test, why we test, is because of those reasons mentioned in the video. Hemp is a great bioaccumulator, so it draws impurities out of the soil. Hemp is an agricultural crop, so obviously there is a possibility of insects, there's a possibility of other contaminants, and being an agricultural crop, it's also, unless the hemp farmer is purely organic, there may be pesticides used at certain points, certain stages of growth, things like that. None of these things you actually want to be consuming or putting on your skin as a consumer. So the reason to test is to make sure that the purity of the product is such that you would actually want to use it. So in our lab, the first thing we do is we start with inspection. The product comes in, whether it's flour or an infused product, and an infused product could be anything from, as Ron was saying, an alcohol tincture to a very clean isolate to a salve that you put on your skin to lip gloss. There's all sorts. We've seen all sorts of wonderful products that have hemp derived cannabinoids in them. So when we get it into the lab, the first thing that we do, and the first thing that you should look for if you're reading a certificate of analysis or a certificate of compliance, is that there has been an inspection. So the inspection identifies what the matrix is, like I said, whether it's a plant or a salve or a tincture, things like that. We take a look under a microscope to see if there are any adulterants, anything that's been added to the sample that is obvious. We take a note of the aroma, so we get an idea of what the terpene profile might be. For dried hemp bud, we actually have a neat little instrument that tells us what the moisture is, the moisture content, because the moisture content is important. If you've got wet hemp, you're going to get mold growing. You don't want mold growing, because mold can cause all sorts of health problems for you later on. We look for insects, both in the natural hemp bud and also, whether there's ants crawling all over the salve, that sort of thing. Any sort of other contaminants that are obvious. It says poop check there. That's a possibility as well. You're something that's being grown outside. There's a possibility that there's insect dirt left on it, that if it's been in a warehouse, that there might have been mice around. So we do check for all of those sort of things.
Very good.
The record on the certificate of analysis.
Very good.
The next part of the certificate, we've already actually talked about potency and terpenes quite a bit. These are what we call the performance standards. our particular panel, it has 11 cannabinoids on it. There are other cannabinoids that can be tested for if somebody actually requires it. They're looking for a particular minor cannabinoid. It is possible for a lab to go and get a certified reference material to be able to qualify and quantify whether how much of these smaller cannabinoids, the minor cannabinoids, are in there. There is a difference between the CBDA and the CBD. One's an acidic form. It's basically the natural form. CBD.
A raw plant, for example, not decarbonized. Raw plant.
Exactly, the raw plant, or if you've got a raw plant extract when the things have just been basically pressed, oil has been pressed out of the plant, that you're going to have the acidified or the CBDA in it. The CBD is what is called decarboxylated. It means that it's been cooked a little bit. The CBD is actually more bioavailable than the CBDA. The CBDA takes longer for your body to absorb. So that's an interesting difference between them. We report out all of these cannabinoids, and as I said, there can be other ones as well. Terpenes we've talked about. We do the major ones are listed there. We do a panel of 22 of them. So some of the minor terpenes we can also look for and identify.
Right.
So going past performance, you get to the contaminants. As mentioned in the video, hemp is an agricultural product. Many times, agricultural products are grown using agricultural methods, such as using fertilizers and pesticides. Got somebody who's planted 1,000 acres of hemp and they get a bug infestation, they're not going to want to just cut down their hemp and start over again. So they're going to find some way of controlling the bugs, and that's actually okay. I know there's discussion about organic farming, and I have no argument with organic farming. It's wonderful, but there's also economic reasons that it isn't done, especially in large acreages.
Absolutely.
The use of pesticides is actually okay as long as the pesticides are dissipated or have disappeared before the product is being used by the consumer. So we do check we use the Montana standard for Montana
Pesticides
products. We also we're capable of using the Colorado or the California panels, which have a lot more
rigorous, maybe more pesticides.
It's more rigorous. That's a good way of putting it.
We should point out that our sensitivity, or what's called the limited detection for pesticides, is phenomenally small. With the equipment we use, it's parts per billion, or even parts per trillion.
Right.
Basically, what you might see just in the ambient air around your neighborhood. So we're very sensitive, or we have capability of detecting extremely small quantities of these pesticides. So when we certify for, say, this panel or even a larger one, and it comes out clean, you can be pretty sure that the pesticide risk is absolutely minimal, if it's nothing.
Right. And that's
quick question.
Just
So, go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, the thing is, we do test for 60 pesticides. We're hoping to eventually get to the Canadian standard, which is like 150.
Brilliant. Yay.
But so we can say that of these 60 pesticides, we haven't found anything. That doesn't mean there isn't something else there. Just a qualifier there.
Absolutely. So back to your point and advocacy for organic farming, what's also upcoming and very important for sustainability worldwide is biodynamic farming. Specific to the hemp crop, do you know of farmers that are able to be certified organically growing hemp? Is that even a possible box to check or certification to earn in the United States at this point? For example, I know some phenomenal growers in Colorado using biodynamic farming methods. Hemp farming is going to help us have a renaissance in agriculture and organic and biodynamic farming. But my question to you, do you know of farmers that are certified organic or biodynamic for hemp? Is that even possible at this point?
We are aware of an organization. It's obviously not a federal organization yet. That is, I believe they're based in California, that is doing a certification for hemp and marijuana,
Organic
certification.
That's right.
Don't recall their name right now, but I believe it's something that is up and coming, and that may very well happen. I also need to point out that some organic certifications, being certified organic doesn't mean that you don't use some sort of pesticide. It just means that what you used is organically derived. For an instance of that is pyrethrins, which are actually the non-synthetic, the natural pyrethrins are derived from chrysanthemum plants. You'll notice they're still on our list of pesticides that we test for, because there is a limit to how much pyrethrin is considered to be safe for a human to somehow get into their body. So there are various degrees of organic, I guess you can call it.
Excellent.
So I'm sorry, go ahead, Kim.
I was just going to say, I believe we're talking about CannaSafe in California. Yeah. They seem to be moving towards helping to aggregate the standards and come up with a safe or organic certification. I believe that we spoke to before.
Right. So moving on from the pesticides, the other contaminants that we look for and that should be looked for in a third-party test are for microbial contaminants. Again, those are E. coli, salmonella, and molds. Those can be introduced at any point during the chain of custody, whether it's plant. If you have an edible, you want to make sure that the edible is produced in a sanitary condition where there aren't cats walking across the countertop and that sort of thing, because that can introduce microbial even if it's been safe up to that point. Mycotoxins are toxic chemicals that are produced by fungus and molds, and those can actually be very toxic to humans. So that is something else that we test for. It's actually something that's tested at the same time that we do the pesticide test. So sensitivity for those are parts per million, parts per billion, to ensure that nothing toxic is getting into a consumer's body. Toxic metals, those usually come from the
bioavailability or the
bioaccumulation ability of hemp. Hemp draws the metals out of the soil, just as part of coming up, or that's just how they grow. Montana, for instance, has pockets of arsenic in the soil, just from the geography. Other parts of the world have different soil contaminants that can be drawn up. So we test for arsenic, cadmium, lead, and mercury, which are the four major toxic metals. We can test for other metals as well, and we often do at the request of a producer.
Brilliant. Is it also being used for phytoremediation in nuclear, cleaning up nuclear areas like Chernobyl and?
Right.
Yes.
Right. Hemp has been used to help clean up that soil as part of the remediation process, and obviously you wouldn't want to be using any of that product or any of those plants for anything that would be consumed or actually even used for other purposes. That really has to go to some sort of sequestering site. So it just displays it's a good example of the ability of this plant to really interact with the environment and pick up whatever might be there, whether it's pesticides that happen to be in the soil or toxic metals.
That's right. And I also want to point out that we do detect mercury occasionally in cosmetic products because under the FDA rules, you can have up to a certain amount of mercury. It's used as a colorant or a pigment. It's also, or mercury oxide is used as a pigment or also as a preservative. So occasionally we pick up mercury that isn't from the bioremediation properties. It's actually been added, which is another reason why it's important for third-party testing or to occur at the very end product of the cycle to what the consumer is actually purchasing, so the consumer is aware of that. The final contaminant deals mostly if there's been some sort of an extraction of the cannabinoids from the hemp plant that hasn't been just a mechanical extraction. And we test for all those solvents listed there. Some of them are pretty aren't going to hurt you too badly. Others, like the xylenes and the toluene and the chloroform, you really don't want to have any of that in a product that you use.
Why do I think chloroform would knock us out? Isn't that what you put on? Yeah,
there's a reason for that, Kim.
So the entourage effect, people. That's a downright. Yeah. Do you have an example of your lab tests that we could apply these phenomenal testing categories to?
Exactly.
Wonderful.
Yeah, coming up. Okay, so our testing, how do we test hemp? The medical marijuana world, agribusiness, has developed many of the methods that we use in the lab and provide many of the standards that we use to provide hemp or to provide to test hemp. So, for example, we need to have a known amount, a very precisely known amount of CBD in a sample, so we can calibrate our instruments. And this goes on for the solvents, it goes on for pesticides, the terpenes, anything else that we're analyzing. We have to have these standards. Unfortunately, they are there because of the medical marijuana world. So the instruments that we use are typically top end. All of our instruments are top end and production oriented. We use the Shimazu primarily. So there's quite an investment that we have here.
Right.
Our reports. So once we've analyzed our reports, there's some things to look out for. We've taken this is the first page of a 2-page report. The second page has more detailed information, but we've designed our results to be readable on a single page as a certificate. And things to look out for. There are many labs that are 17025 certified. Wonderful. We all tend to have our different flavors of reports, but they all should have certain things. And these are what consumers should be looking for to establish that, okay, this is a lab report that I can trust. This is a lab report that means something to me. And I can go ahead and with good confidence make this purchase. So the first part seems trivial, but identification. Make sure that what the report has been given, what report you've been given, actually represents what you're buying or what you're using. It's very common to give, say, a certificate of analysis for a precursor. That really doesn't mean much to you as a consumer because, okay, what happened between that precursor and the packaged product I have in my hand? You need to understand that. And also with that identification, make sure the company name is there. Unfortunately, we found that some certificates, whether ours or other laboratories, have been poached off the internet. They've been This was a photoshopped, and with a little bit of cutting and pasting, it becomes a different company, and maybe slightly different percentages, and maybe it's safe now. So anyway, it needs to be
All to save. If they only spent $350 to $400, they could do it right and have a science alliance.
Exactly. It's not a big difference.
The test consumers lose.
Yeah.
That's wrong. That's wrong. Yeah. So that's why you have the water. I see.
So your report should have some security features. So we've spent quite a bit of time on this. We have a QR code, for example, which is basically, this is the ET call home for us. If somebody has a question about the report, they can scan that QR code. Very difficult to, well, I guess they can fix it, but anyway, it'll give contact information for us. We can verify that yes, we did this test. There's some things we can't disclose because it's a property of the person who generated it, but we can at least verify that this is a real test. It's not some company we've never heard of. Another thing we do is a watermark. You see in the background there, a little bit hard to see on the screen, but there's a watermark there with the lab ID on it, and it's reproduced all over. So cutting and pasting becomes a much more difficult thing to do. And in fact, the watermark goes over our signature, so that every signature is unique for every report. So you look for these things when you first get the report. Make sure that A is authentic, and B, has this been manipulated in any way. Once you've established that, then you can go on to the interesting parts. The analysis summary, a report should have that at the top, so it very quickly gets to the point of interest. In this case, it's a total cannabinoid content of 9.12%. This is for a sample of hemp.
Okay.
If you look at the potency, it should have a listing there. It should have a listing of all of the cannabinoids that were tested and their percentages. It should also include the LOD, which is the limit of detection. Now, how sensitive is the instrument? The LOQ, limit of quantification, is a little bit different than detection. And the experimental error. How confident is a lab in this number? Every measurement has an error, and you should understand how accurate that is. So that, say you're looking at the CBDA, it's 8.27%, and you're upset that, well, wait a minute, last time it was 8.29. Well, you look at the error on that. Well, okay, it's well within that spread. So this information gives you some idea not only what's been analyzed, but also how accurate the lab is and what statistics are behind it. You don't have to be a scientist to understand most of this, but you should understand that this information should go along with every reported value. Every reported value should have an error. That's just a basis of science. So look for that in your reports. Something else you should look for, the accreditation, 17025. Obviously, that's the direction most labs have gone. Quite frankly, not aware of any other international organization that's equivalent. So 17025, whether it's through the A2LA or Perry Johnson or ANLAB, I mean, there are many that could be. They're all fine. They've all been certified internationally by accreditation boards. So that's the seal of approval there. So if you look at your report and you have these elements, you see the numbers that you like, and you can establish that it's a valid report and you have accreditation. You can be assured that the information you're looking at is traceable, it's valid, and you can make a decision based on that.
This is the absolute importance of a third-party independent lab test versus a lab test being conducted at the same facility that might be growing, manufacturing, producing, and have a lab. They, in all honesty, may or may not be able to state anything they want, as opposed to having a check and balance accountability system and a science alliance with a third-party lab. That just seems like consumers, I don't know if we even know, but we're growing to know the importance of verification of a product through third-party independent lab testing. And also, this lab test that you're showing, Dr. Brost, I see potency highlighted. A lot of products online just show their potency aspect of the lab report. That's not the complete story, is it? Going back to what Chris showed us on the previous slide,
Right.
we want to know about molds and microbes and mycotoxins and pesticides and no solvents. So a complete test would have 7 panels, ideally. Is that correct?
Yeah, actually 8 panels in some cases if you have solvents or if you have an extract. So yes, so there are many aspects of potency. Of course, is the most important, and the others, they should all be passing. The failures, there should be no failures in any product that you receive. If they are, then you have to question why why is that product in your hands.
And if they don't show that part of the test, you have to question that. We really don't know about these other panels, not just the potency, although that quantifies the product and hopefully its therapeutic value, but there's a bigger picture here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Your analysis, that first should give you a pretty complete story. Who did the test? What was it? What are the results? How effective is this? What's the performance? All that story should be there. What has been tested for? Are there any pests? I mean, all of that should be there. And it's quite frankly a struggle to get this on one sheet of paper. There's so much work behind these, but it's worth diving into.
It absolutely is. We lost Stephanie. Stephanie, did you pass out? Hi.
Okay, hope she can join.
Yeah, good. She's back.
Okay, great.
We're just about rounding out the top of the hour. You had a few more slides before we wrap. We did have some questions as well.
Or I think is a question: who does the testing? No, there's an expense to it. As you mentioned earlier, it's $350, $400 for a test for full panel testing. But no, who pays for that? And are you? If it depends, of course. Are you a manufacturer? Are you a supplier of one of the derivatives? Are you making a package for a consumer? Obviously, this is not something a consumer is going to pay for. Is it the retailer? Good question. But basically, there are a couple of points in its cycle life, in its production life that it should be tested at. Good manufacturing practice, compel testing flower extracts for potency and potential contamination. You just need to know that information as a matter of good manufacturing methods. You want to know, are you going to be contaminating your plant with something that you don't know about until later, until it's caused you a lot of problems. So that's certainly one point. Between every time you change form, you really could be running some sort of test. It could be internal testing, it could be a partial panel, but you should be running some tests as you transform your product from one to the other. However, at the end of it, you really should be testing the full panel before it goes out. And this is for a couple of reasons. Yes, you've already tested, let's say, your CBD source, but there are many other components that typically go into it. Your oils, your hemp oils, was that contaminated? As any of the additives and the thickeners, is there any sort of source of contamination? In the course of cosmetics, have you added inadvertently some mercury compound that you really should know about? For all these reasons, and also for the sake that your consumer, or the end consumer, really should have a certificate at the end of it saying, hey, they've tested all these things. This particular product, I know what the potency is, I know what the terpene profile is, that's kind of cool. I know that there are no pesticides in it. I know that there's no metals or to the level that I'm concerned about. No solvents. Great, I'm good to go here. So you need to really want to have that for your consumer at the end of it. So so at a minimum, two full tests, and anything in the middle that helps you with your production. So I think that's our story here.
We are so grateful for your time and your contributions to this conversation. Stephanie, do we have any questions you want to pose to Dr. Brost and Chris Brost before we wrap? I saw about glyphosate.
Yes, we did have a question. Do we know how glyphosate affects the hemp plant?
Glyphosate.
Oh yeah. At this stage of life, I mean, it depends on the concentration, of course. Yeah, Roundup is a tool that's been very prevalent for quite some time now, and it's going to be with us for a while. We don't currently test for that on the basis that, well, it's not required for the medical marijuana program. Can we test for that? At some point, yes, we will.
Yes.
But it affects the plant in enough concentration, a high enough concentration. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a broadleaf systemic killer. So hemp is a broadleaf plant.
So it will take it up, it will absorb it, and that's something to look out for.
So we Did I hear you say that if someone wanted to test their hemp for glyphosate, you could calibrate and
we certainly have the equipment, and talk to us if you're interested in that. Yes.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you both. Thank you, Dr. Gross. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Kim. Just to remind everyone, this was Planet-Based Healing, Episode 8, How and Why Lab Tests All Hemp-Derived Products. This is a collaboration with Well World TV, We Consulting, and Papelia. Your guest today was Dr. Ron Brost. He is an analytical and research scientist. Myself, Stephanie, and Kim Collier were your hosts. And this was brought to you by CollierConcepts. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Wishing you a great weekend.
Okay.
You too.
You too.